had sepsis around 7 years ago, and I'd been on holiday. I'd been to Malaga for a weekend away and was travelling back from Malaga, feeling a little bit unwell, a little bit worn out towards the end of the holiday. Sometimes people just sort of think that's holiday blues. I think what changed very drastically for me was within the space of feeling very fatigued. Within sort of 6-7 hours, I went from feeling very fatigued to being very dehydrated, very unwell, in the sense that my temperature had gone through the roof. I was been sick. I was very unwell in terms of how I felt in myself. Literally just felt like I was dying, basically. I was on the plane at this point, coming back, and my partner at the time found me, or had noticed that I'd not been at my seat for a while, that I'd gone to the toilet on the plane, and hadn't come back. They ultimately had to open the door on the plane, of the toilet, and I was pretty much passed out. And to be honest, that's as what I can remember. Everything becomes a bit of a blur from there. Obviously, I've had people fill in the gaps since, and I'd probably be able to tell you a bit more about that now. So I at that point was on the floor, fortunately enough, being with someone that knew me and knew my condition. They was able to kind of explain, well, actually, Sam has this blood condition. I carry a red card for this blood condition, which is called Paroxysmal Nocturnal Haemoglobinuria, and the red card indicates that I'm at high risk of sepsis. Very fortunately for me, being 35,000 feet in the air, it's not like you can get an ambulance to come and just help you. They put a call out for a nurse on the plane. Fortunately enough for me, there was two nurses, two sisters that was on the plane. They'd just been on one sister's hen do, and they come over to help me very quickly. They knew that it was meningococcal septicemia. They could tell that's in the signs. I think what really struck me after was not really knowing much about the condition myself prior to having it, was how much people in healthcare settings actually do know about it and how much they could recognise it. If it probably wasn't for them recognising it, I wouldn't have got the treatment on the ground ready for me, for when the plane landed at Birmingham. Very quickly then I remembered landing at Birmingham Airport, and that's probably the sort of last thing I remember for almost 2 weeks at that point, because from there I was taken to Birmingham Heartlands Hospital. It was very much touch and go in terms of whether I was sort of going to pull through, and I was in intensive care for the vast majority of 2 weeks. It's quite scary when friends and family come and visit you in there, perhaps ones that you haven't seen for a while. That kind of brings it home. That does make, you start to think, well, I mean, you're not really thinking an awful lot, but those things that you are thinking of, is they're here for a reason. It must have been equally as hard for them as it was for me lying there. Having various wires, tubes, and things coming from various parts of my body. It was quite scary in that respect. It's not a situation I want to be in again. You also know it's quite bad when your legs are covered legs from head to toe, really, covered in these rashes. That ultimately those rashes went from the top of my head all the way down to my feet. They actually took photos of them because it was like the worst I'd ever seen in some cases, and that's what really, when things like that start happening, we're like, wow, this is what's going on. I think the overall surprising thing for me was, in that short space of time of when I was on holiday, and literally I'd been on the beach at 8 o'clock in the morning, to 6 o'clock at night, I'd gone from being perfectly fine I think I'd been in the sea. I'd been splashing about on the beach like a little kid almost, and then literally by 6 o'clock at night, it was completely different. I was virtually like incapacitated. In hindsight, I shouldn't have really got on a plane to come back. It could have been the biggest mistake that I'd ever made. In my head, I was kind of like, I want to get on the plane because I want to get back to the UK. And when you start to feel unwell, the last last place people want to be is abroad when they're unwell, especially if they're due to come home that day. But I think one thing that is probably memory realised is in that situation, seek medical attention straight away rather than waiting. The recovery was, I think, very much twofold in terms of physical and mental. The mental side of it, nightmares after, you almost relive it. I say nightmares. I wouldn't just say it's nightmares. I'd say when I get ill now, and there is similar symptoms, you get a flashback of it. Obviously, you don't hope it's that. I'm, I guess, fortunate in the extent I know what to look out for again now. But if, let's say, like 2 years ago, I was admitted to hospital with a really high temperature following my treatment that I have for my blood condition. And there was elements of not wanting to go to hospital because of that, and it creates that fear. I'm quite fortunate in the sense that my family and friends around me were very insistent that wasn't going to happen and I was going to be checked out, which I'm very grateful for. But that was almost 5 years after, and that for that to be happening at that point is quite scary, because you're thinking in your head, well, how's this still sort of going on? How's this sort of still there? And it is literally a barrier. I had to go to the hospital for an appointment the other week, and I walked past where intensive care is in Heartlands Hospital, and what I try to do is remember the fantastic work that they had done for me, but there is an element of, you still remember parts of it. I don't remember actually going into there, and I don't remember coming out, because I was completely out of it going into there, and probably asleep coming out, fortunately enough, which was good. But there's parts of it that you do remember, and in the weeks and months after as well, you're sleepless, you've got the aches, the pains, the scars, that still sit there, and it does constantly, it's a constant reminder of it. And I think mentally that was probably the harder part of recovering. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy physically, but I've kind of got to a point where I've pretty much recovered from it, but there will always be that mental scarring as well as some physical scarring. But fortunately, again, through sort of the great work of the doctors around me and the nurses around me, that the physical effects weren't as bad as what I guess the mental effects were. Originally, I didn't, I'll be honest, speak about it that much at all. I did have a good support network. I kind of walked away from it with this approach of, oh, well, you're very lucky, so you should be grateful, and you should be, you should accept that you're still here, and that's, you're one of the lucky ones. And that kind of, what you do in that scenario then is you start going, well, because of that I can't really speak about it, and you go a bit harsh on yourself. I'll be honest, if I'd have been more proactive and had more people, hopefully, like what I'm trying to do about raising awareness, is I probably would have gone and spoke to someone, because I feel like that, as I said earlier, that although the mental recovery side of it took a lot longer, I didn't necessarily help myself by seeking support. So no, I didn't seek support at the time, but I think in the over the long term it would have benefited me massively to do so, and I'd encourage anyone to do that. It's something now that I'm hoping to try and reverse the effects of by doing what I'm doing today, by being here today. I've got my marathon coming up, half marathon coming up next year, marathon a year later, which, yes, it is fantastic in terms of what I'm trying to achieve long term, with my physical recovery, and that's ongoing still, but also that's mainly part of the mental recovery, is actually raising awareness and actually talking about my situation has helped me deal with that. That I am one of the lucky ones. Some people aren't able to walk again. They have limbs removed, and that's quite unfortunate. I didn't have that unfortunate experience of having to have a limb removed or anything. I was, again, very close to it, but part of that was because of getting up, being able to get up and walk again. That took a fair few months to get back to. Initially, in the first couple of weeks after, it was very much physio support that I needed, help just standing up, and even just walking, like a yard or two was virtually impossible. It took me a good 12 to 18 months probably to fully lose like walking aids and crutches and things like that, so that was quite a long time. And this was going from prior to me being able to do running, walking, and be relatively fit to do those things, but then all of a sudden you go to that point of not being able to walk at all, and then it's like learning to walk again. It was literally like learning to walk again. That was quite difficult. There was random pains that I would get 6, 12, 18 months after, that pains that I didn't necessarily never had or anything like that. I'd then, a few months sort of after, there was, as I say, there was the psychological effects, but then one of the psychological effects, then from a mental effect, there was things around like not being able to do things myself, like pick things up, or do any of the activities that I was before. It really did take 12 to 18 months to recover physically from those effects and get walking properly again. And it was only last year that I started really getting back into running. So now we're talking sort of five years later. We're still sort of paying the effects of it, because you just didn't, from where I was, I just didn't think that was going to be possible ever again. And somehow I'm now going to be running a half marathon in May. I was doing the running, and then a friend suggested to me, why don't you try and do a half marathon? At this point I could just about run like 3 kilometers, and a half marathon's 20 kilometers, so I'd got a long way to go. And anyway, we sat down, and I was like, yeah, but what do I do it for? He's like, I'll do it for yourself. And don't get me wrong, I'm always motivated to do myself, but I was like, I could just run 20 kilometers, like on a random road on my own. I haven't got to do it as a half marathon. And he was like, well, why don't you do it for the Sepsis Trust? And then, lo and behold, a week later, I met Brian at an event at Villa Park, and it very quickly became one of those things where I was like, well, actually, yeah, I'm really interested in doing this, and it's just that then seemed like the right time, and it seemed for me like that final step for me in that mental recovery. That's what it feels like, in the sense of, okay, well, you've managed to get through what you did, but now you go back and make sure other people can as well, and that's kind of why I've decided to do it. I didn't have a thermometer before I had sepsis. I didn't carry a thermometer with me. I had prophylactic antibiotics, penicillin, that I took because of my treatment that I'm on. I used to be fairly organised with them. I probably did miss a dose or two at some points in my life, and actually I'd hate to think that almost cost me my life with this, but keeping up to date with your medication, having support in place so that you've even a thermometer. I mean, they're a couple of £1 on Amazon, but you've got an underlying condition, or you're on some form of immunotherapy or something along those lines, then you know, just checking your temperature really could sort of save your life. And those things, that's what kind of started made me realise, well, actually there is things that you can do yourself. And then the biggest one that I think I didn't do is seek help as well. I just didn't. I very much went, oh, this is just part and parcel of my condition. And yes, that might be the case. And no one wants to be at a hospital every 5 minutes. But actually, if you do check your symptoms, if you do speak to a doctor, a nurse, or one of your health professionals, and just run them through what's going on, I think that is literally the thing that could save your life. Because if you do leave it to the last minute, you are completely narrowing down the chances of A, surviving, or B, having life-changing injuries that literally will last for life. I think it's important that with anything, whether it be sepsis, whether it be cancer, or any other illness or anything along those lines, that whatever it is, just get it checked, just get it looked at. Don't take any risk with it, you know. For the sake of a couple of hours, it could give you another few years on your life, and that's what it's about. And I'd probably caveat that again and remind myself of this is, if you're abroad, don't let that put you off either. I very much let it put me off. I was like, no, I just want to get home. The worst part about it is I had holiday insurance. That's why I've bought holiday insurance. No, it wouldn't have been the nicest experiences, but you know, I was very fortunate. Some people, you know, could get on a longer flight, or if it had been on the plane any longer, it could have had more serious impacts in terms of what happened. So yeah, don't waste time when it comes to getting that looked up.